Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome back to Deep Dive. I hope 2025 is off to a fantastic start for you. It's a brand new year, and we're back with a fresh deep dive into a topic that I think is perfect for this time of new beginnings. Kicking those excuses to the curb.
Oh, I like where you're going with this. There's something about a fresh start that makes us want to finally tackle those goals we've been putting off.
Exactly. And to help us with that, we're turning back to Christopher Walker's Defeating Excusitis, the failure disease. Remember in the previous chapters how we uncovered all those sneaky excuses that hold us back, blaming our circumstances, doubting ourselves, you name it.
Yeah, it's fascinating how pervasive excusitis can be. It affects so many of us in ways we don't even realize.
Totally. And in Chapter 6, Walker tackles a big one we're probably all too familiar with, time excusitis.
Yeah.
You know, the classic, I don't have enough time.
Yeah.
I'm willing to bet we've all uttered that phrase at some point.
Oh, absolutely. It's an incredibly common form of excusitis, and one that can feel very justified in our fast-paced world. But here's the thing. Walker, along with Laura Vanderkam in her book 168 Hours, you have more time than you think challenge this very assumption.
Wait, so you're telling me those people who seem to effortlessly manage their careers, families, and hobbies, they don't actually have more hours in the day?
Nope, not at all. The secret lies in how they choose to use their time. They've mastered the art of prioritization and conscious decision-making. We all have the same 168 hours every week. It's about making them work for us.
This reminds me of Walker's story about his friend who loved photography, but always claimed to never have time to actually pick up her camera.
Yes, a classic case of overcommitting fueling time excusitis. Her calendar was packed with work, social events, chores, and her passion project kept getting pushed aside. It's not about a lack of time, but lack of focus and clear priorities.
It's so easy to fall into that trap, isn't it? Spreading ourselves thin across so many commitments that we end up feeling constantly overwhelmed. And then we use the no time excuse to avoid the things we genuinely want to do. Speaking of which, didn't Walker have another story about a colleague struggling with this?
He did. This colleague wanted to get back into fitness but could never find the time for a full hour-long workout. He kept waiting for that perfect, uninterrupted hour, and guess what? Months went by, and he still hadn't started.
Oh, I've been there. It's like that feeling of needing the perfect conditions before we begin something new.
Exactly. It's the perfectionism trap in action. We convince ourselves that we need large chunks of time to do things right, and that leads to procrastination. But as this colleague eventually learned, starting small and being consistent is far more effective. Even 20-minute workouts are better than none. The perfect hour rarely exists. It's about making the time, even if it's not ideal.
So how do we break free from this overcommitting cycle? Walker offers some really practical steps, right?
He does. He outlines 8 key strategies to combat overcommitting. And what I appreciate is that he illustrates each one with relatable examples, making them easy to understand and implement.
Okay, let's hear them. I'm all ears.
Well, first and foremost, he emphasizes setting clear priorities. This means identifying what truly matters to you and aligning your commitments accordingly. He uses the example of Sarah, a marketing manager who was constantly saying yes to every project thinking it would help her career. She ended up completely overwhelmed. Once she started setting clear priorities, she was able to say no to tasks that didn't align with her goals and focus on projects that truly mattered.
That makes so much sense. It's not just about doing more, it's about doing the right things. It's about being intentional with how we spend our time.
Absolutely. And speaking of being intentional, another key strategy is learning to say no. It's about setting healthy boundaries and recognizing that we can't do everything. Walker shares the story of John, a freelance designer who was in the habit of taking on every client who came his way. This led to burnout and lower quality work. Once he started saying no to clients who weren't a good fit, he could focus on higher value projects he enjoyed.
Those examples are so helpful because they show how these strategies actually work in real-life situations. It's one thing to talk about setting priorities, but seeing how Sarah and John applied them makes it much more tangible. What are some of the other strategies Walker suggests?
He also highlights the importance of time blocking, scheduling specific blocks of time for particular tasks, and evaluating the long-term impact of our commitments. Asking ourselves, will this matter a year from now, to help prioritize effectively?
These all sound incredibly useful. I'm already feeling inspired to take a closer look at my own schedule and see where I can implement these strategies.
It's a great starting point, and remember, even small adjustments can make a big difference.
Okay, so we've tackled overcommitting. But I have a feeling there's more to the time excusitis puzzle, right? I mean, even when we have a clear schedule and priorities, sometimes we still find ourselves losing time without realizing it. I know I'm guilty of getting sucked into the black hole of notifications and mindless scrolling on my phone.
Ah, yes, the distractions of the digital age. It's so easy to lose track of time when we're constantly bombarded with information and entertainment. We think we're just taking a quick break, but those minutes quickly add up.
It's almost like time theft. We're robbed of precious moments without even realizing it. But sometimes I wonder if there's something deeper at play here, something beyond just distractions.
You're right. There's another fascinating layer that Walker peels back, and it's where things get really interesting. He argues that often, I don't have time is masking a deeper fear, the fear of failure. We avoid starting things because we're afraid of what will happen if we try and don't succeed.
That's a powerful insight. It's like we're using the no time excuse as a shield to protect ourselves from potential disappointment or judgment.
Exactly. It's easier to say, I don't have time, than to face that fear head on and risk failing.
So how does Walker illustrate this idea? Does he have another story that brings this concept to life?
He does. He talks about a woman named Jane who had always dreamed of writing a book. She kept putting it off, claiming she didn't have time. But as they talked further, it became clear that fear was the real obstacle.
Fear of what exactly?
She was afraid her book wouldn't be good enough, afraid of rejection, afraid of what others would think. It's a fear that many aspiring creatives experience, but it can apply to any goal we're putting off.
Her story resonates with me. I know that fear all too well. It's so much easier to stay in our comfort zones and avoid putting ourselves out there.
Exactly. But think about it this way. What if J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter, had given in to time excusitis fueled by fear? She faced numerous rejections before finding success.
Wow, that's an incredible perspective.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine a world without Harry Potter now.
Right. If she had told herself, I don't have time to write, I have to focus on my day job, her story and the world of literature would be completely different.
It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most successful people are those who are willing to push past their fear and make time for their passions, even when it felt impossible.
And, this idea of fear holding us back connects beautifully to Stephen Pressfield's concept of resistance from his book, The War of Art.
Oh, yes. Didn't Pressfield describe resistance as this invisible force that keeps us from doing our most important work?
That's it. He argues that resistance often manifests as procrastination, self-doubt, and those excuses we make to avoid pursuing our creative callings.
So if we connect this back to time excusitis, could we say that resistance is like the fuel behind those fear-based, I don't have time pronouncements?
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it. When we're afraid of failing, resistance steps in and whispers, you're too busy, now's not the right time, you'll do it later. And before we know it, we've convinced ourselves that time excusitis is the real culprit.
It's like a vicious cycle. Fear fuels resistance, which in turn feeds time excusitis. But knowing this, how do we break free from this pattern? What are some actionable steps we can take to overcome this fear-based time excusitis?
That's a great question, and one we'll delve into further after a quick break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
So before the break, we were getting into the nitty-gritty of how fear can actually disguise itself as time excusitis.
Yes, we were talking about how resistance, that sneaky force Stephen Pressfield talks about in The War of Art, can amplify those fear-based excuses.
And it's like using the no time excuse as a shield to avoid facing those scary what-ifs.
Exactly. But knowing this, we can start to recognize these patterns and develop strategies to overcome them. Walker offers some really practical advice for tackling this fear-based time excusitis.
Okay, so spill the beans. What are some of his tips?
Well, one of his key suggestions is to break down tasks into smaller steps.
Ah, the classic bite-sized chunks approach.
Precisely. Instead of focusing on the overwhelming goal of, say, writing an entire book, start by simply writing 1 page a day.
I can see how that would make the task feel less daunting and more approachable.
Exactly. It's about shifting our focus from the massive end goal to those small, consistent actions that ultimately lead to progress.
This reminds me of how Sarah, the entrepreneur from Walker's book, managed to launch her side hustle.
Yes. She felt overwhelmed by the demands of her job family and her dream of starting a business. But she started by identifying her non-negotiables like her job and quality time with her kids.
So she figured out what absolutely had to happen in her schedule.
Right. And then she took a hard look at her habits, realizing she spent a lot of time on things that weren't serving her, like mindless scrolling and TV after work.
Those time traps can be so sneaky. We think we're just relaxing,
Yeah,
but those hours can quickly slip away.
they absolutely can. And for Sarah, reclaiming those hours was key to making her business dream a reality. She started waking up an hour earlier, 3 days a week, to focus solely on her side hustle.
Wow, that's dedication.
It is. But it's also a great example of how even small adjustments to our schedule can make a huge difference. She also carved out time on Saturday mornings for business tasks.
So she made it a priority, even if it meant giving up some leisure time.
And the results speak for themselves. Within a month, she had launched her website and landed her first client.
That's so inspiring. It shows that it's not about having more time, but about making conscious choices about how we use the time we have.
Absolutely. And it highlights the importance of identifying those time traps and reclaiming those lost hours.
Okay, so Sarah focused on finding those extra hours in her week. But what about those of us who struggle with saying no? I remember Walker mentioned a story about James, a software engineer who was a chronic people pleaser.
Yes. James was always willing to help friends and colleagues, even if it meant sacrificing his own goals. He wanted to learn data analysis to advance his career, but constantly got pulled into helping others, leaving him feeling frustrated.
It's so easy to fall into that pattern. Wanting to be helpful, but ending up overcommitted and neglecting our own needs?
It really is. But Walker emphasizes that learning to say no is crucial for reclaiming our time and energy. It's not about being selfish, but about setting healthy boundaries and prioritizing our well-being.
So how did James finally break free from this cycle of overcommitting?
He started by setting aside 2 hours every evening for data analysis study. And to protect that time, he learned to politely decline requests that conflicted with his schedule.
So he actually blocked off that time in his calendar and treated it as non-negotiable.
Exactly. And he practiced saying things like, "I'd love to help, but I'm focused on a personal project right now. Let's schedule another time if it's urgent."
That's a great way to communicate your boundaries without being dismissive.
Right. And surprisingly, most people respected his decision. Remember, you don't have to justify your no.
That's such a good reminder. It's easy to get caught up in what others think, but ultimately we need to prioritize our own goals and well-being.
Absolutely. And James's story demonstrates that saying no can be liberating. It creates space for pursuing passions without feeling overwhelmed.
These stories are so encouraging. They show that it is possible to overcome time excusitis, even when we feel incredibly busy.
The key takeaway is that it's about making conscious choices with our time, identifying priorities, setting boundaries, and eliminating distractions.
And it's about those small, consistent actions that lead to big results over time. But let's go back to Jane for a second, the aspiring author who is struggling with fear.
Yes, Jane. She's a great example of how to combat that fear-based time excusitis.
So how did she finally break through and start writing her book?
Walker encouraged her to focus on the process, not the outcome. He reminded her that perfection is an illusion and that it's more important to simply start writing than to wait for the perfect moment.
So it's about getting out of our own way and allowing ourselves to create without judgment.
Exactly. And Jane took that advice to heart. She started setting aside small chunks of time each day to write, even if it was just for 15 minutes.
And I bet once she started, the words began to flow more easily.
They did. She realized she had been overthinking it, allowing fear to paralyze her.
It's amazing how we can create our own obstacles, building up mental barriers that prevent us from taking action.
Sometimes the biggest obstacle is ourselves. But Jane's story shows that once we recognize those self-imposed limitations, we can break free.
It's a powerful reminder that we all have the potential to achieve great things if we push past our fear and make time for what truly matters.
Absolutely. But now let's shift gears a bit. We've focused on internal obstacles like fear and procrastination, but there are also external pressures that can contribute to feeling overwhelmed.
That's a great point. It's easy to blame ourselves for not managing time effectively. But sometimes there are external factors that make it incredibly difficult to find balance.
In the next segment, we'll delve into those external factors: societal expectations, workplace demands, and the constant barrage of technology.
It sounds like we're about to explore the dark side of the always connected world.
We'll explore how these forces can fuel time excusitis and discuss strategies for navigating them in a way that allows us to reclaim our time and prioritize well-being.
This is getting good. I'm ready to dive in. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It feels like we've uncovered so many layers of time excusitis already.
We have, from overcommitting and perfectionism to the sneaky influence of fear, and that resistance gremlin Stephen Pressfield so cleverly describes.
But now we're stepping outside of ourselves, right? Looking at how the world around us can make this no time feeling even worse.
Exactly. It's not always just about our own choices. Societal expectations, the demands of our workplaces, and the ever-present lure of technology all play a role.
It's like we're surrounded by messages telling us to do more, be more, and stay constantly connected.
It's the always-on mentality. creating this sense of urgency that's hard to escape. We're expected to be responsive at all hours, juggling multiple demands, and it's no wonder we feel like we're perpetually running out of time.
And then there's that pressure to achieve, to constantly strive for more. Social media often amplifies this, showcasing these curated highlight reels of success that can leave us feeling inadequate or behind.
It's the comparison track. We see others seemingly effortlessly managing thriving careers, picture-perfect families, exotic vacations, and it's easy to start questioning our own choices and accomplishments. This can lead to that nagging feeling of never enough, which just fuels time excusitis even further.
It's like we're on this relentless treadmill, chasing an elusive ideal of success and never quite feeling satisfied with where we are.
That's a great analogy. And on top of all that, we have technology designed to keep us hooked, vying for every spare moment of our attention. Notifications, emails, social media feeds, they're engineered to trigger those dopamine hits, keeping us scrolling and clicking, often at the expense of activities that truly nourish our well-being.
It's easy to feel scattered and overwhelmed with the constant influx of information. And it's almost like we feel obligated to stay in the loop, even if it's draining our time and energy.
That's the insidious part of it. We feel this pressure to be constantly informed, even if it comes at the cost of our own peace of mind. But here's the crucial question. Knowing these external pressures are very real, how do we navigate them without succumbing to time excusitis?
That's what I'm eager to hear. It can't be about disconnecting from the world completely, can it?
No, not at all. It's not about becoming hermits or shunning technology altogether. It's about creating intentional boundaries and making conscious choices that align with our values.
Okay, I like where this is going. So where do we even begin to reclaim our time in the face of these external pressures?
The first step is awareness. Start by paying attention to the messages you're absorbing. Are you constantly comparing yourself to others on social media? Do you feel pressured to be productive every waking moment? Recognizing these external influences is crucial for reclaiming your time and energy.
So it's about questioning those societal expectations and defining success on our own terms.
Precisely. Don't let external pressures dictate your values and priorities. Once you've identified those external pressures, it's time to create space in your day for activities that nourish your soul and bring you joy. This might be spending time in nature, pursuing a creative hobby, reading a good book, or simply disconnecting from technology for a few hours.
It's about making time for those things that help us recharge and reconnect with ourselves rather than getting swept away in the current of constant busyness.
Exactly. And it's equally important to practice the art of saying no. This applies to requests and demands coming from both internal and external sources. Remember, it's okay to decline requests that don't align with your priorities, even if they come from well-intentioned people.
Setting boundaries is essential for protecting our time and energy, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's about communicating your needs clearly and respectfully without feeling obligated to say yes to everything that comes your way. Remember, every time you say yes to something, you're implicitly saying no to something else.
That's such a powerful way to think about it. It's about making conscious choices about how we spend our time rather than letting external pressures dictate our every move.
Now let's talk about technology. Those devices are tools, and it's up to us to decide how we use them. Turn off unnecessary notifications, set limits on your social media usage, and create designated tech-free zones in your home or workspace.
It's about taking back control over our attention and choosing how we spend our precious time, rather than letting those devices dictate our every move.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into time excusitis, remember this. It's not about magically finding more time. It's about making deliberate choices about how we use the time we have, even amidst the external pressures of the modern world. It's about setting those boundaries, prioritizing our well-being, and reclaiming control over our attention.
It's an ongoing journey, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I feel like armed with these insights from Christopher Walker, Laura Vanderkam, and even Stephen Pressfield,
Yeah.
we're better equipped to navigate the time crunch and create a life that feels both fulfilling and aligned with our values.
You've got it. And remember, you're not alone in this. Many of us are grappling with these same challenges. By talking about it, sharing our experiences, and supporting each other, we can create a more balanced and fulfilling world for ourselves and future generations.
Absolutely. As we step into this new year, I encourage you to reflect on your own relationship with time. What are those sneaky time excuses that are holding you back? What external pressures are draining your energy? And most importantly, what are those things that truly matter to you? Those things you want to prioritize in the year ahead?
I hope this deep dive has provided you with some valuable insights and tools to conquer time excusitis and create a life that is both meaningful and balanced.
It certainly has for me. And remember, even small changes can make a big difference over time. So start today. Make a conscious choice to reclaim your time and prioritize the things that bring you joy and fulfillment.
Thank you for joining us on this journey, and we look forward to diving into more fascinating topics with you soon.
And don't forget to subscribe to Dialogue Dimensions, like, share, and leave a comment.